Well, hello, hello, hello. What's up, everybody? Happy Sunday. Welcome back to Sunday service. It will be midnight service for some of you. Let me know where you're at in the chat. Of course, how could I let the moment pass without acknowledging the incredible things that are happening in Iran, aka Persia. Ahura Mazda has re-entered the chat. Ayatollah is no longer my best friend. I just wanted to take a moment to, you guys should all be watching that. It's amazing how people on X, or just the internet in general, how much better informed they are than people who watch the mainstream media. Iran is overthrowing the yoke of oppression that it has been under my entire life. I was born in 81. The Ayatollah came into power in 1979. Talk about real evil. Talk about real evil. Thanks to the meddling of Jimmy Carter, who wanted cheap oil. The Iranian people, the Persian people, were given over to the jaws of the lion. And they had, as I keep saying, they had Marxist revolutionaries who decided to overthrow the Shah and then were liquidated by the forces of the Ayatollah, who came in and instituted a theocracy with a big thank you, ma'am, wham bam thank you, ma'am, to the Marxists. It's all ending. With any luck, Reza Khan, I'm sorry. The Crown Prince. Why am I blanking? I'm actually embarrassed. I can't. Reza Shah Pahlavi. Yeah, the Reza Shah. I was blanking because I was like, the Shah, Reza, his name is Reza Shah. With any luck, he'll be reinstalled as king. And lots of people are very, very excited right now. Very excited. The real feminism is happening. The overthrow of the patriarchy, of theocracy. Incredible. Jason Giorgiani, who's an occultist that has wrote a book called Prometheus Unbound and several others, interesting guy, has been tweeting that he expects that Iran to become one of the most secular, modernized countries in the world. I wouldn't be surprised. And this really does change everything, doesn't it? It's real hard to claim Islamophobia when it's, 90 million people are Islamophobes in Iran? For kicking out the theocracy that rules them. And of course, all over X, all of the, Slim Jim, what's up, says, the silence is deafening. I feel like I'm the only one I know who's been sharing anything about it. You gotta wonder, why is that? I mean, I really don't check in with mainstream news much anymore. You know, I'm constantly on Google News, that's technically mainstream news. Google News aggregates for me, and then I'm on X. But from what I've been gathering, the mainstream media has been reporting it as a protest over energy. Like, no, they're throwing out the Ayatollah because Israel and the US struck their nuclear facilities and pantsed the Ayatollah and showed everyone that he's a paper tiger. And they're very likely going to throw him out. And that will change the trajectory of the entire world in a really, really positive way. It will change everything. It will give the world back one of its great cultures, Persia, 6,000-year-old culture, Zoroastrian. Probably largely secular after this. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I wouldn't want to see anything relating to religion after living under the under the Ayatollah. There were lots of women who were taken off the street and tortured for protests for not wearing hijabs in the last couple of years. You hear that on mainstream media? No. There's actual people fighting for actual freedom in a way that actually matters. And they're winning. Yeah, and as Christina says, effing crickets. Effing crickets. Well, it won't be crickets long, particularly if the Ayatollah falls. From what I understand, he's actually out of the country and hiding in Russia. That's a fascinating... If you don't know about the history of Iran, you cannot understand the modern world. You cannot understand the modern world and what's going on without understanding at least the last 40, 50 years of Iranian history. Oh yeah, and of course, as those of you who have followed the channel for some time may have noticed, we cursed the Ayatollah ritually a few months back. I'm just throwing that. I'm not saying it had anything to do with anything. Far be it for me to say that. Just throwing that out there. We spent 3 hours cursing the Ayatollah. Anyone who is watching this channel from Iran, and I know there are some of you, my heart is with you. Our hearts are with you. I always love to hear from Persian people, here or there, you know, because we have lots of Persian friends in the U.S. as well. You guys must be really, really excited. My hope is that the U.S. and Israel intervene and protect the protesters and finish the job. And I'm sure Netanyahu would love to. P.S. Netanyahu was right. Go figure. And it turns out Iran was a lot easier to knock over than we thought. Go figure. Well, history will vindicate me. And it is hilarious watching super left-wing people squirm because now they can't claim Islamophobia when a country in the Middle East is overthrowing the yoke of Islam. So let's see who's here. Hello, everyone. We got lots of the gangs all here. What's up, Jason? What's up, Rosa Flame? What's up? Who else? Juan Jose Castro, Tyler Van Valkenburg, Slim Jim, of course, Young Stitches, Dr. Zero Free Magic Secret Show. Nice name. What's up, Manessa? What's up, James? What's up, MGH? What's up, Christina? We have 2 Van Valkenburgs. Are you related? What's up? What's up, Jason? What's up, MF and Damien? And did I miss anyone? Let's see. I am Pope Paul. What's up? And Steve Mitchell, very honorable frauder DLS. What does DLS stand for? Can you tell us? And what's up, Occultology and Lotus Jewels? Everyone's here. So, what a fortunate and fortuitous time to continue our reading in The Tree of Evil by William G. Gray. What's up, Hogboy? I'm a big fan of you too. So the link is in the description if you want to check out the first part, but you don't need to have watched the first part to get this one. Long story short, 93 Young Stitches, 93 Love is the law, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, love is the law, love under will. Got to say the full version. What's up, Clobberlang and Rebellious Meat Puppet? Oh, you are related, the Van Valkenburgs. Welcome both of you. Oh. So, just a quick catch-up, we are talking about the Qliphoth, the dreaded, forbidden, the most forbidden topic in magic. The Tree of Death. Not the Tree of Life, the Tree of Death, the Tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Rather, a mathematical way of talking about the opposite, or perhaps corrosion and perversion of the architecture of life. Not in a ridiculous way. Occultology, thank you for becoming a member. Said loving Adept 2, Jason. It's great. Thanks for the shout out. Yes, Adept Initiative 2 is available. And Fortuna Working 2 will be available within the next 48 hours. It's done. I just got to finish the squeeze page for it. If you bought any of the Solstice Working packages, you get it for free as part of that, as promised. And it will be available for everyone else to purchase as well, with payment plans if needed. So keep an eye out for that. So yeah, the Qliphoth. The Sephiroth, the Tree of Life, is the best map of humanity's meaning-making capacity that has ever been made. It's the mathematics of meaning. The Qliphoth is the negative version of it. And why is Jason talking about it? Because as those of you who've been following me for a while know, I did a whole lot of Qliphothic magic back in the mid-2000s up in Vancouver and in New York, and blew myself to smithereens. I do not recommend working with this stuff directly at all. So all the information about this topic is from sources like Kenneth Grant, Linda Filorio, Thomas Carlson, and even weirder places. And that stuff is good, but it's a little bit too enamored of the topic. We'll just leave it at that. What I'm reading is William G. Gray's The Tree of Evil, a classic, long out of print book from the 70s. You can't even get a copy for less than $600 on Amazon right now, at last check. Is long out of print. If you like this book, please buy William G. Gray's other books, which you can get from Weiser. He's very famous for writing The Ladder of Lights, an excellent introduction to Kabbalah. And I believe he is from the Dion Fortune side of things, which is a pretty, much more white lighty and pleasant and safer branch of things than the Crowley branch. And so we're not talking about how to do Qliphotic magic. We're not talking about the tunnels of Set or anything like that. We're talking about identifying evil and using this as a diagnostic tool to understand what evil is, because it has many forms and it operates in all of those forms all over the world. And it often seems like evil's about to win. Particularly for the 2020s have been an extremely dark decade. Extremely dark, beginning with you know what. Extremely dark. But then, every once in a while, things like, oh, all of a sudden, Persia's overthrowing the Ayatollah. Rays of light. Okay, that's like Star Wars level. That's like Rebel Alliance beats the Empire level. Truly, truly. Oh, Steve Mitchell says they found a copy on eBay for $30 last week. Nice find. Nice find. Yeah, so okay, so if you can find it on eBay, good snag. Hopefully these videos don't drive the price up. The $600 was on Amazon, but it's been out of print since the 70s. All right, so we are approaching the Qliphoth like a doctor who is looking for a diagnostic tool for pathogens that are already present within human consciousness so that they can be isolated, and we will never wipe them out because they're part of the structure of the universe, but they can be isolated and worked through and passed within individuals. And in many ways, the great work, capital G, capital W, is nothing but that. And I always tell people, you don't need to go seeking out the Qliphoth, because as you work your way up the tree of life, each of these invokes its opposite anyways. And those of you who are further along the path will know what I'm talking about. So let us proceed into the bacterial breach and see what we can diagnose and perhaps come up with antibodies for in the vast morass of the Qliphoth. Chapter 2. Yes, that was pronounced wrong on purpose. Chapter 2 of the Tree of Evil. We'll see how far we get tonight. Making both ends meet. So you should see to the left of me, we have two diagrams. One is the Tree of Life, the Holy Tree of Life, the map of everything in human consciousness from God to man. And then we have the Tree of Evil, which I think just the names on those spheres alone, with atheism as at the top, should tell you quite a lot. Should tell you quite a lot. I don't want to crowd myself out here. So instead of the pillars of severity, mildness, and mercy, we have compulsion, condemnation, and coercion. So yes, here's the Qliphoth Cliff Notes. Chapter 2, Making Both Ends Meet. It is often assumed that our good and evil activities are quite apart from each other and have nothing in common. This is completely fallacious. By the way, you don't need to understand anything about Kabbalah or Qliphoth or these diagrams at all to understand to enjoy this. Removing the abstractions for a bit, which we will talk about and go through, we're talking about evil. What is the nature of evil? Okay, that's the question we're asking and hopefully answering to some extent within this stream. What is the nature of evil? What is the nature of evil? go into this talk with that question in your mind. It is often assumed that our good and evil activities are quite apart from each other and have nothing in common. This is completely fallacious. Human activity as such is limited within a definite range of capabilities, and good or ill motivations can extend through them all. An action is an action, which means expenditure of energy, and energy per se is always convertible into other terms. For example, a person or persons may intend evil and act accordingly. Let's just unpack that sentence. A person or persons may intend evil and act accordingly. That right there is blasphemy and heresy to modern liberalism, who does not recognize evil as a thing. You ever heard of the devil's greatest trick, etc., but believes that all, whatever we could call it, all ill effect is produced by structures. So if somebody goes and stabs a granny for their handbag, it's because of structures of oppression that they've grown up within that have made them do that. No, it's because they chose to do it. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right answer. Evil is something that people can choose of their own free will. Period. Human beings have free will. They were given free will by God. As part of the deal, they can use the free will to choose the wrong thing. Otherwise, it wouldn't be free will, now would it? And hence the paradox of evil. But evil can be chosen, and must therefore be met with the obvious consequence. As one of my Hindu teachers put it to me, speaking from Vedanta, you can choose to be the bad guy, but you must suffer the bad guy's fate. And so the issue in our society right now is not even as much evil, because evil is eternal. It cannot be wiped out. It's part of the human experience, right? The issue with our society is not that evil exists. It is that we pretend it doesn't. It is that we pretend it doesn't, or that we can engineer it out of society with some type of social engineering and programs and analysis of structures. No. Evil is evil. It's real simple, guys. So the problem with our culture is that we refuse to name it, refuse to shame it in most cases, and refuse to respond to it with the necessary countermeasures. I'm sure you've all heard, all it takes for evil to spread is for good men to do nothing, right? So in many cases, the problem is not evil. The problem is that people have fallen asleep at the wheel, and they want to pretend it doesn't exist, which is conflict avoidance. That's all it is, conflict avoidance. We'd rather stay home with our phones and our material comforts and outsource everything to some NGO. It's not going to happen. All right. So all of that to unpack one sentence. For example, a person or persons may intend evil and act accordingly. Go figure. Yeah, that's a controversial statement. People can choose evil. Go figure. The energies involved may be contained within a greater field, which is controlled by those intending good, and so, in the long run, will good be made of evil. The same has to be true in the case of evil. If well-meaning but weak people act with good intentions but feeble effect, this may be commandeered by intelligent agents of evil motives and misappropriated accordingly. These are indeed the, quote, good intentions that pave the way to hell. They did so because they were feeble and foolish in the first place. Were it not for even greater intelligences acting in the interests of cosmic intentions, we should be on much lower life levels than we are. Why do we not see this clearly enough? Largely because from a purely human viewpoint, the effects of applied evil are usually so perceptible in terms of time-space effects, and the greater area of good which contains these seems relatively distant and beyond immediate importance. It is also true that those who are closely wrapped up in immediate short-term illusory apparent benefits usually fail to notice the confines of arranged evil round the pseudo-self, put there for, quote, soul bait. This is why we're told so often not to fight evil with evil, but to overcome evil with good, or grow to such spiritual stature that we are capable of containing, neutralizing, and converting ill-intentioned energies with an ever-increasing degree of ability. Let us take a look at this problem in practical appearance on the tree of life, as contrasted against the tree of evil. Again, these both to my left. It can scarcely be emphasized enough that the tree of life cannot be perverted or made to symbolize evil per se. The tree of evil is only an outline of what would be produced if the qualities of the life tree were deliberately and intentionally rejected in favor of their diametrical opposites. Interesting. So basically he's saying it's like an imaginary number. It is a theoretical presentation of what ought not to be lived, so that the tree of life may truly prosper in the souls and spirits of those seeking its cultivation. Interesting. So he's saying the tree of evil doesn't exist, but it exists as it is implied as the negative corollary of the tree of life. Now, people who are more advanced could say, well, existence and non-existence are two sides of the same thing, and just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You'll know what I mean. People who are further along the path will know what I mean. But there you have it. Life may truly prosper in the souls and spirits of those seeking its cultivation. In effect, it is as if anyone said, if I am to be disciplined, I must not be cruel. If I mean to be merciful, I must not be apathetic. If I will to be wise, then I must not be stupid. And so forth. The tree of evil is simply to tell us what has to be negated in order to recover the equivalent energies in the appropriate category of the tree of life. It is quite true that the energies of good qualities may be reversed into evil courses intentionally. The risk and responsibility for this must be incurred and accepted by whoever is deranged or depraved enough to intend it. Translation, fuck around, find out. See, you'll never run out of shortage of people who are willing to fuck around. The problem is that our society has largely dropped the find out part. For such, the tree of evil can provide nothing more than a passport to ultimate perdition. For those intending their own self-salvation, the tree of evil offers a valuable set of instructions in activity avoidance and a table of energy conversation which can be of greatest spiritual service. So we shall make use of it at present. Suppose we take a few factors applying to stage 10 on the trees and see what the linkage is. In this case, we shall have to note the connections between a soul struggling on the tree of life to recognize the rulership of divinity in this material world, and another soul purely concerned in the same sphere on the tree of evil, with becoming the biggest pseudo-self here that it can. Each being would see the same integers arranged differently for opposite purposes. A set of these ideas could read this way. So here we will combine them side by side. So for the 10th sphere, on the tree of life, it's the kingdom of God. On the tree of evil, it's materialism. Actually, I'm going to need to, give me one second. The formatting got pulled out in what I'm looking at, so I need to make sure I'm reading these correctly side by side. 1 second. This will take no time at all. Worry you not. All right, here we go. You know what? In fact, I'm just going to screenshot this and put it up, because I'm going to screenshot this and put this up, because this is way better as a table scene. Okay. Okay, here we go. So side by side, the qualities of the 10 spheres of the tree of life and the tree of evil. Tree of life, Malkuth. The kingdom of God. Qliphoth, materialism. 9, Yesod, or the moon. Tree of life, foundation of life. Tree of evil, instability. So foundation, instability. 8, Hod, glory. Tree of life, tree of evil, greed. 7, Netzach, Venus, love. On the tree of life is achievement, or victory is the actual name of it. On the tree of evil, it is lust. 6, beauty or harmony, Tifereth. But in the tree of evil, it's ugliness and inharmony. There's a wrong space there. It means inharmonious. Then 5, Geburah. Now, here's another major error in our society right now. The confusion of Geburah. So, Geburah is discipline and setting of boundaries, by the way, on the tree of life, necessary for life. But on the tree of evil, it's cruelty. Pashad. I'm not pronouncing that right. Our culture has confused those two and therefore decided to get rid of both of them by conceiving of all boundary and all boundary setting as cruelty. Not so. Tree of life in Jupiter, Chesed, is compassion. Tree of evil, apathy. Now we have the abyss between noumenon, or between phenomenon and noumenon. On the tree of life, to use Kantian terms, on the tree of life, the abyss is crossed by experience. On the tree of evil, abyss is imposed by ignorance. For Saturn, Bina, on the tree of life, it's understanding. On the tree of evil, antipathy. Chokmah, ultimate male principle, is wisdom on the tree of life, and stupidity on the tree of evil. And of course, the apex of spirit, Kether, the crown on the tree of life, is, in William Gray's summation, atheism. The actual name of it is Thamiel, the contending heads. So unity into, basically unity, and then unresolvable duality. And finally, ultimate light or ultimate darkness. Hi. Let me make sure I'm in the right place here. All right, so I'm going to put up another screenshot. And these are, we could see them as the self-talk, right? Or yeah, let's see them as the self-talk that relates to whether you're experiencing which tree, right? So now we're going the other way. So let's start at the crown, right? So these are attitudes, because yes, attitudes towards life will shape your experience, your entire experience. Methods of self-talk following these will create these, right? So for crown, the kingdom, for the crown, Kether, on the tree of life, the self-talk, we shall say, is, I'm here to experience life. But on the tree of evil, it's, life is here for me to experience. On the tree of life, Chokmah is, everything matters. Tree of evil, matter is everything. Bina, Saturn, tree of life, I evolve through animal life. Tree of evil, I live as an evolved animal. Note the subtle Descartesian dualism. So, Hesed, Jupiter on the tree of life, I will become myself only in the one life of spirit. Tree of evil, I will have only this one earth life to become myself. Transhumanism, like that weird dude who's trying to live forever. Geburah on the tree of life, I can get all I ought, meaning life will provide for me. On the tree of evil, I ought to get all I can. Scarcity. Tifereth on the tree of life, it is impossible to exist without spirit. Tree of evil, the existence of spirit is impossible. Netzach, Venus, on the tree of life, I will relate all life by its common denominator of the living cosmic spirit, controlled by that in me, I shall become what I will in it. But the tree of evil, I will relate all on earth by the common denominator of money. As I control that, so shall I do what I want in this world. So note at the top we have the kingdom of God, meaning it is all happening for you and through you and as part of you. And then we have materialism, right? Dead matter, atheism. So Hod, Mercury in the Tree of Life, I cannot live on earth without a body. Respect of the body. On the Tree of Evil, without an earthly body, I cannot live. Yesod on the Tree of Life, I can believe in anything not accepting this physical world. I can believe in anything not accepting this physical world. Tree of Evil, I cannot believe in anything accepting this physical world. Only the physical world is real. Finally, Malkuth on the Tree of Life, eat and drink so that if we die tomorrow, we shall be merry. And the Tree of Evil is eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. These are subtle. But in the subtlety is everything. So I think looking at these as attitudes to life, or of self-talk, that's a lot healthier than, taking the Kenneth Grant approach. All right. So here we have 10 ways of dealing with life on the bottom sphere of its tree. In each case, the same fundamental notions are angled in different directions to produce opposing viewpoints. One polarity shows life as being entirely confined to physical levels applying to humans for one incarnation only, during which they should get all they can out of it. The other end of the same scheme reveals an evolving entity progressing through and past material living towards a spiritual status independent of Earth existence. Everything depends on how we polarize our self-circuits, and this in turn depends upon our individual wills. Perhaps a cynic might say our lack of will. It is true that average humans vacillate with only small degrees of will between both extremities, but this does not alter the fact that they could dedicate themselves either way if they so chose. Eventually, they might even learn the middle method of progression towards a state of spiritual life perfection termed simply peace profound because it passes our understanding entirely. Instead of stopping to analyze each point carefully here, let us go straight on to the next sphere of the tree. Oh, hang on a second. Wait, these are all for Malkuth. These are all for Malkuth. I attributed them to the spheres. I went subsphere. I went too Kabbalistic. These are all Malkuth. Okay, so let's go to Yesod now. Fascinating. Fascinating. So I'm not going to bother stressing about whether he's subcategorized by Sephirah. We'll just focus on the overall sphere. All right. Instead of stopping to analyze each point carefully here, let us go straight on to the next sphere of the tree. This is classified as foundation, Yesod, and deals with basics of life which should give us stability, such as our families, our faiths, aims, and so forth. It also concerns fertility of body, mind, and soul, insofar as it provides the equivalence of genes out of which we have to build up our own life entities. Looked at from similar standpoints on both trees of life and evil, we might select another contrasting 10 ideas like this. So I'm going to go down each column and then the other. Well, no, we'll do it like this. Okay, so tree of life. What matters in life is that... Here, I'll do this. No, forget it. What matters in life is that all should have a chance. Tree of evil. Life is all a matter of chance. Life, live in stability. We'll say good, live in stability. Evil, live in instability. Good, be responsible in living. Evil, live irresponsibly in being. Good, place faith in no thing. Evil, place faith in nothing. Good, the meaning of life is found in infinite nil. Evil, There is no meaning to be found in life. Good, growth under control. Evil, grow uncontrollably. Good, be discriminate in breeding. Evil, breed indiscriminately. Good, the significance of society. Evil, families are socially insignificant. Good, sex is of some importance to all. Evil, sex is something all-important. Good, life is certainly all. Evil, all life is uncertain. Very, very good. All right, another 10 inversals taking place through the same sphere of the tree. It might be necessary to remind ourselves here that the nil factor is taken mystically to mean the ultimate zoic zero, or point at which we pass beyond being human altogether. Therefore, it is the highest possible positive aim of every initiated individual. It is only when people begin to appreciate the incredible potential of what others consider nothing that they commence the reversal of their polarities, which results in living upwardly and inwardly towards infinite light. In fact, it is exactly this change of polarity away from pseudo-self and back towards the true self which marks an initiated soul from one which has not yet begun this process of its own free will. To initiate means to begin, and once we have commenced our changed course of inner cosmos in conformity with what amounts to our true wills, then we may be classified as genuine initiates of life. No synthetic lodge or temple titles will ever confer this degree upon us. It is something we must learn of our own accord entirely. There is no other way. To continue with our tree contrasts, we shall branch out to the next sphere of glory or honor. Frauder, what's up? Thank you for the gift memberships, and I see a super chat from Ren. Perhaps a silly concept question, but how does the concept of lust, as it's representing strength in the Thoth deck, differ from lust in the Tree of Death? Thank you for these. We're probably going to get way off on the metaphysical. We're going to cross the streams if we go down that. So we'll potentially circle back to that. But we're kind of comparing apples and oranges with Crowley and Dion Fortune. All right. Thank you for the super chat. Which is a long way of saying these two authors would completely disagree on that point. But we're in William Gray reality right now. All right. We shall next branch out to the sphere of glory or honor. This is concerned with the principles of life which provide incentives for us to develop ourselves in fair and legitimate ways which will bring credit to us, yet harm no one. Its opposite number in terms of evil is just plain greed, which cares nothing for how much anyone else may be hurt, as long as objectives are gained by hook or by crook. A set of contrasts may read like this. Good, you cannot cheat life without paying. Evil, you cannot make life pay without cheating. Good, know the import of being a self. Evil, be known by your self-importance. Good, take every advantage to benefit others for your own good. Evil, take every advantage of others for your own benefit. Good, be not deceived. Evil, to deceive is nothing. Good, don't steal, earn it. Evil, don't earn it, steal it. Good, it is foolish to enjoy flattery. Evil, enjoy the flattery of fools. Good, grasp what being means. Evil, be mean and grasping. Good, be clever, make others think. Evil, make others think you're clever. Good, admire the possibilities of learning. Evil, learn how it is possible to be admired. Good, laugh with others at what happens. Evil, laugh at what happens with others, or to others. Pretty straightforward. Notice how it really does come down to common sense, the basic common sense facts of life. So looking at the evil side of this tree, we can see a rather unpleasant sort of person sneering back. But who would be rash enough to deny some slight reflections of his own inner appearance? There should be little doubt, however, about where the dividing line between the two polarities comes. If we cross over the tree plan to the next sphere altogether, it may seem similar to the last because it is called victory on the good side and plain lust on the bad. Lust and greed are not exactly the same at all. Greed indicates some degrees of cunning and even perverted intelligence. Note that this is Hod, the sphere of intelligence. But lust signifies a get-it-at-all-costs outlook. So, Ren, I think, like, as we go through this, it should probably clarify your question to some degree. Lust signifies a get-it-at-all-costs outlook. Lust will even destroy itself in achieving an objective, or destroy the objective to prevent anyone else achieving it. Greed may be temporarily satiated, but lust is unquenchable. Where greed would infiltrate, lust must dominate. Its victory is so often purely Pyrrhic. A contrasting Pyrrhic victory means that you win, but at such cost that it would have been better not to. You win at not just great cost, but at total cost to yourself. A contrasting tree at this sphere could read, all right, let's pull this up next. The magic of screenshotting. All right, so Netzach. Good. Overcome evil with good. Evil. Overcome good with evil. Good. Achieve what is right. Evil. Achievement is your right. Good. Be master of yourself. Evil. Be the master yourself. Good. Desire to be satisfied. Evil. Satisfy your desires. Good. Make your forces obey your will. Evil. Make your will obeyed by force. Good. Be it against your will to use compulsion on others. Evil. Use your compulsion on others against their will. Good. Let no cost be unaccounted for. Evil. Count not any costs. Good. Break nothing you cannot make. Evil. Break to nothing what you cannot make. Break to nothing what you cannot make. Destroy because you cannot create. Good. Conquer hate. Evil. Hate and conquer. Good. Oppose all intending to destroy you. Evil. Destroy all intending to oppose you. So just a few comments. Brad says, speaking of evil, how do you overcome the anger that is inspired by seeing how absolutely ignorant and hurtful all people are in our culture? All? Watch the globalizing. Like, how do you deal with righteous fury? Great, we will cover that in Sphere 5, Geburah. That's exactly what that sphere is about. So hang in there. Occultology and Fraud RC say the tree of evil is like the playbook of progressives. Let's call them what they are, okay? Communists. Progressives. Progressing towards what? Towards communism. Yeah, notice what is the tree of what is Malkuth in the tree of evil? Materialism. What is Marxism? Historical materialism. It completely removes any analysis of human history except class struggle and economics. It is a purely economic read of history. How's that for evil, for materialism? All right. We'll leave that up till we get to the next bit. A concentration of the tree of evil characteristics on this sphere would certainly produce a dangerous and vicious person. Yet the same factors turned round could result in a very noble and potent being. The next sphere ought to show up some interesting contrast too, because it is that of beauty, or harmonious balance. If that is seriously out of true, then the poise of the entire plan is bound to be affected somehow. Glancing from one tree to the other, we might see something like this. All right, so let's do Qliphoth. So he's actually not using the Hebrew names in this, but I am. He's keeping it simple. All right, so Qliphoth, or the New Age way to look at it would be Christ consciousness, the sphere of salvation. Thank you, Tyler. Tyler says, this is excellent teaching. I appreciate it. Well, thank William Gray. But I'll accept praise for bringing it to your awareness. And Ren says, this really does clarify. Thank you. Not to conflate unconnected things, but it reminds me of comparing the contrast of Lilith and Babylon. Yeah, I think that's well put. Particularly, I mean, Lust is the card of Babylon in the Thoth deck. And Brad says, sorry, all may have been a bit of an exaggeration. Oh yeah, I'm just pointing it out. That's always something good to catch for everyone. If you notice yourself doing it, if you say all, really? Question yourself. Is it really all? Because once you globalize, then it becomes overwhelming, right? This is something I genuinely struggle with. I don't know if it's my own ego or if I'm justified in my anger. So yes, right? So if you were on the stream earlier, I was talking about how our culture struggles with the sphere of Geburah, which is the next sphere what's the sphere we do after this will be about this question. So our culture struggles with this, the difference between setting a boundary and cruelty, right? And so it's thrown out both and just said, don't be mean, right? So that question that you're struggling with, that's something we all struggle with. That's something I struggle with. It's something that our culture struggles with. So we will get right in. So again, remember, we're doing this as diagnostics to see where we're at. So these are all excellent points. We will cover them in the next sphere. But for now, let's do Tefereth, the sun. Good. Control chaos, then create what you will. Evil. Create chaos, then control what you will. Create chaos, then control what you will. Chaos is a ladder. I do the first type of chaos magic. Control chaos, then create what you will. The second type is like Little John in Game of Thrones. Good. In a universe of eternal beauty, all ugliness must fade away. Evil. In universal ugliness, beauty must fade away forever. Good. Whoso rules out beauty blasts the world. Evil. Whoso blasts out beauty rules the world. Good. Discover what prevents people from knowing the difference between beauty and ugliness. Evil. Prevent people from discovering the difference between beauty and ugliness. Man, I could go off on such a tangent about that, but I'm not going to. Good. Truth strikes up about like socialist art. Truth strikes up in harmony. Evil. In harmony strikes out at truth. Good. Never persuade people to accept ugliness. Evil. Persuade people to accept ugliness or nothing. Good. Keep in control of yourself. Evil. Keep yourself in control. Subtle. Good. Control confusion in yourself and others. Evil. Confuse others, then control them yourself. Good. Make opportunities for others to regain lost balance. Evil. Unbalance others to make opportunities for yourself. It's like starting to read like the 48 Laws of Power, right? The evil side. Good. The secret of perfection lies in preventing deliberate disorganization. Evil. In deliberate disorganization lies the secret of preventing perfection. In deliberate disorganization lies the secret of preventing perfection. So create chaos, consternation, and madness. Look around at our culture. How coherent is it? One of the ways of gauging the integrity of something is literally to gauge its structural integrity. If it makes sense, if it's simple, if it holds up, if it's tried and tested and true and eternal, you can go with it. If it's confusing, if it's jargon, if it doesn't make sense, if it leads to chaos, if it leads to people just becoming more scattered, you might not want to F with it. There's not a whole lot of coherence in our culture right now. Why? Because that benefits people who aren't you. All right. Here we get a picture. I'll leave this up. Here we get a picture of an evilly intentioned being with sufficient intelligence to know quite well how to upset the processes of cosmos in his own self-circles for very anti-cosmic motives. It is natural that the higher we climb the tree, the more advanced we shall find the degree of adepthood either way. An interesting point here is that evil entities show recognition of their own limitations. This is true. They realized they could not only, they realized they could not entirely destroy the workings of cosmos at this particular point without breaking up their own pseudo-selves also, which, aside, is the thing they're most terrified of. Therefore, they learn how to create a controllable chaos which affects others adversely, yet leaves their own main interests clear, such as outbreaks of civil violence. Does it sound familiar? Such as outbreaks of civil violence, contained warfare, inexplicably altered economies, this was written in the 70s, and carefully directed confusions of thinking coupled with attacks on basic beliefs. Let me read that again, because this doesn't sound like everything going on all around you right now. You're not paying attention. Let me back up. Evil entities show recognition of their own limitations. They realize they could not entirely destroy the workings of cosmos at this particular point without breaking up their own pseudo-selves also. Therefore, they learn how to create a controllable chaos which affects others adversely, yet leaves their own main interests clear, such as outbreaks of civil violence, contained warfare, inexplicably altered economies, and carefully directed confusions of thinking coupled with attacks on basic beliefs. If asked for their own beliefs, they might reply cynically that the hand which rocks human concepts of order and balance beliefs may also rule this world. It is all a question of tipping the balance of everything toward their own favor. All right, and now we shall move on to Geburah, as we were just talking about with Brad. Let's pull up Geburah. All right. So the difference between severity and cruelty, this is what Brad was talking about with knowing, when is it right to be angry and when is it not, right? As a very basic, I'm reiterating that in a basic way. And this one right here is where our culture is hung up. Dion Fortune says that even. She was saying that in the 30s. And I still agree. The next sphere up the tree is a really stringent one. I think she says that in Mystical Kabbalah, by the way. The next sphere up the tree is a really stringent one. In good terms, it signifies discipline, economy, strict justice, and all the qualities of correct training at any life level. On the evil side, it degenerates into plain and horrible cruelty. Again, the factors are convertible. We can change to either side at will. One set of contrasts could read, good, be strictly just. Evil, just be strict. Good, hate to hurt. Evil, hurt and hate. Good, conquer the will to kill. Evil, will to kill or conquer. Good, feel for ill treatment of others. Evil, ill-treat the feelings of others. Good, revenge is wrong. Evil, revenge all wrongs. Good, be severe only in necessity. Evil, it is necessary to be severe. Good, respect whoso will not punish you. Evil, punish whoso will not respect you. Good, be fearful of ever being brutal. Evil, be brutal and feared forever. Good, force ferocity to be subdued. Evil, subdue by ferocious force. Good, discipline yourself to make others accept you. Evil, make others accept your discipline. Martial artists understand Geburah. Yeah, martial arts are a great discipline for this. You'll notice Damien Eccles is like all about that now. Yeah, martial arts are a great way to discipline this. Most of my work in the world sphere, not in teaching, but in my interactions with the world, most of my work as an ascended master is in the sphere of Geburah. And it's largely working on this issue right here. And that's why I can manifest extremely severely in my opinions and on social media. Because I'm working out basically what I've already been talking about, that confusion there. because too far in one either direction is will destroy the whole thing. Because remember, Gebura isn't just discipline, okay? In 777 on the Tree of Life, it's your skeletal system. It's structure. In order for something to have structure, it must choose one between what it is and what it is not, right? You could also associate it perhaps with the skin, or the ability of the skin to keep out external contaminants from the body so that it doesn't become sick. Without going on a big tangent about this, World War II was so bad that our culture basically just wanted to shut off aggression entirely, and that's understandable. That's understandable, and anything connected with it. The problem with that is that it simply makes it, not only does it produce unhealthy and non-sane people, because you can't be healthy and sane without discipline, structure, and boundaries. You really can't. P.S. Those of you who work in the therapeutic fields will know very well that one of the primary roles of the psychotherapist is to assist in establishing boundaries for their client that the parent did not successfully model for them. Yeah, and occultology says it also manifests at the national level. Yeah, it manifests at all levels. So the primary work of the therapist, so think about this, in returning somebody to functional sanity, is to assist them in establishing boundaries that they were not able to establish themselves, likely because their parents were not able to model them for them, right? So our society, in many ways, particularly on the left, has decided that the answer is just simply to pull out the claws of all the animals being us. Well, if you've ever lived with a declawed animal, you know they are insane. It is not healthy. It's an incredibly cruel thing to do to somebody, to take away their ability to defend themselves. On the other hand, when it manifests too much on the other side, well, to wrap up that thought, not only does it make people not healthy mentally, but it makes them vulnerable to people who are all on the cruelty side. Because people on the Tree of Evil, here's another misunderstanding that people think about good and evil, right? White lighter types always think that they can save and heal evil. Like, evil laughs at that. Evil thrives on that. The evil mentality is those people are stupid, so they deserve what they get. And they get what they deserve. Right? Evil loves a mark. Evil loves a mark. Right? And they consider those people weak and stupid, so therefore they deserve what's coming to them. This is how criminals think. So long way of saying, this is the primary place where our culture is sick. And of course, you see this playing out in the culture war and all of that. All right, moving on. Hopefully that is helpful for you, Brad. This gives a decided impression of someone who could be vicious and vengeful on one side, or a disciplined devotee to duty on the other. Again and again, these contrasting trees keep reminding us of the saying, the greater the sinner, the greater the saint. It is amazing sometimes what a thin hairbreadth separates one state from the other. Take the next sphere, for instance. All right, so let's pull up. We're going to go to Chesed now. Oops. All right, so now we're in the sphere of Jupiter before crossing the Kantian abyss. All right. Take the next sphere, for instance. On the good side, we have a magnanimous, kindly, generous, merciful, and compassionate nature. So with Jupiter, with the sphere of Hesed, think of a good judge, a kindly and fair judge, who's not too strict but not too merciful. On the good side, we have a magnanimous, kindly, generous, merciful, and compassionate nature. On the other side, an indifferent, lazy, bored, and couldn't care less sort of outlook which just lets life go to hell in its own handbasket. A contrasting set of concepts might postulate: good, nothing is too much trouble for anything. Evil, everything is too much trouble for nothing. Good, don't let anything bother you. Evil, don't be bothered with anything. That's a good one. Good, care for others that have none to care. Evil, care not for the cares of others. Good, be merciful, waste no time. Evil, waste no time being merciful. Good, where there is generosity, there is no necessity. Evil, there is no necessity for generosity. Good, have compassion on the weak. Evil, it is weak to have compassion. Good, life should be too happy for weariness. Evil, life is too wearying for happiness, or tiring. Good, live, love, and laugh. Live, laugh, love. Evil, it is laughable to try loving life. Imagine if you went to an Airbnb and they had a sign on the wall that said, it is laughable to try loving life. Evil, Qliphoth Airbnb, true horror. Good, answer anyone in need. Evil, needless to answer anyone. Good, make efforts to help anyone worthwhile. Evil, is it worthwhile making efforts to help anyone? It being a rhetorical question on the part of evil, of course. Yeah, Brad says, so let's check in with Brad. Brad says, and thank you, Billy, for becoming a member. Everyone, please like and subscribe, of course. The channel is growing. And consider becoming a member to support talks like this. Brad says, I liked what you said about helping people establish boundaries because I always interpreted any form of boundaries as meanness. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Well put. That's exactly it. That's exactly the issue. That's for everyone. For Western culture, whatever that means. Right? That's it. That's the confusion. I will definitely be working on establishing healthy boundaries. Yeah, thank you for articulating that. So I always interpreted any form of boundaries as meanness. Yes, that's the confusion. All right. Well put. All right, rather a concise rundown on how one person would take a set of factors and be magnanimously merciful, while another would use the same set for becoming idly irresponsible and indifferent. As always, everything turns upon the pivot of individual inclination. We now come up against what we might as well call the ignorance gap in our tree scheme, aka the abyss. Let me clear the decks of the previous ones, and then let's see what he has for us there. Oh, he doesn't have anything for the abyss, okay. By ignorance is meant a deliberate refusal. So if you remember, so the abyss is the gap between noumenon and phenomenon, or vice versa. And in Gray's teaching, it is crossed in good by experience and in evil by ignorance. Okay, so he says, so that's the comparison. Experience, ignorance. We now come up against what we might as well call the ignorance gap in our tree scheme. By ignorance is meant a deliberate refusal to cross the borderline between real understanding, wisdom linked with acceptance of an ultimate awareness, and a state of stupid and strenuous denial that the, quote, cosmic constant of spiritually living consciousness exists. Ignorance implies intentional rejection of the life spirit as a controlling consciousness of cosmos. Refusal to accept or be associated with any, quote, divine directions connected with our more advanced stages of conscious living. Mere lack of wisdom or understanding, those being the names of Bina and Hokmah, so the transabyssal spheres, the supernals. Mere lack of wisdom or understanding per se is not necessarily ignorance, but may well be sheer innocence. Ignorance is always intentional. Sorry, just a Gray Magic Dragon says, all are beautifully articulated, but such polarizing statements. Yeah, that's the point. We're polarizing good and evil. So you'll notice the subtle, I don't know exactly what you meant by that, so I may not be directly responding to your comment, but notice that notice that polarization itself is considered bad. Who does that benefit? Who does that benefit? Right? We do need to polarize. Same with Geburah. We need boundaries. Good and evil exist. There is good. There is evil. They're very clear. You know what they are. All you can do is convince yourself that you don't, long enough to do the thing. You don't want to do that. So if, as I am, right, you know, certainly as I go through these, I am seeing as I'm going through these, I'm saying it's like, oh yeah, there's some places that I could clean up, and you know, there's some of these that I need to be more clear on, right? Note that you probably may be having, some of you may be having the same experience, right? So we all have individually things that we need to work on, and then we have things that as a culture we all share that we need to work on. And so in a way we all reflect each other in this. All right. Mere lack of wisdom or understanding per se is not necessarily ignorance, but may well be sheer innocence. Ignorance is always intentional, while innocence is conditional. So this is where we have to balance these two alternatives in ourselves and at least come to a personal poising point between them. If we manage to cross the abyss which divides most of our more ordinary faculties from our highest principles of understanding and wisdom, we shall find that we have a choice even on this level of promoting or perverting the powers of either. Let us see how the next sphere of understanding, which naturally signifies also sympathy and intuition, could be twisted into a willful or vindictive travesty of what it should lead us toward in life. All right, so let's pull up Saturn, Bina. So for Ren's earlier question, this is Babylon, right? It's not the path, well, the path of Teth or Lust in the Thoth deck is between Geburah and Hokmah, or excuse me, Geburah and Hesed. But this is, of course, Babylon in the ultimate sense. All right. Saturn. Good. It is pathetic being anti-anything. It is pathetic being anti-anything. Evil. Be antipathetic to everything. Good. Understand, then you need not fear. Evil. So I want to clarify this. It is pathetic being anti-anything. At this level of consciousness, you understand how everything is essentially, how everything fits. You understand how everything fits together as one larger puzzle. Okay. So therefore, it is pathetic being anti-anything. But evil, be antipathetic to everything. Good. Understand, then you need not fear. Evil. Fear what you do not understand. Good. Try to understand things. Evil. Understanding things is trying. That's hard. Good. Be sympathetic to the stupid. Evil. Sympathy is stupid. Good. Understanding avoids hate. Evil. Hate avoids understanding. Good. Don't reject anything. Listen and learn. Evil. Don't listen to anything. Reject learning. Good. Shun dangers by intuition. Evil. Intuition is dangerous. Shun it. And therefore the feminine principle, etc. It being associated with Bina. Good. Do not dislike what you do not understand. Evil. Refuse to understand what you dislike. Good. Who understands enough to care? Evil. Who cares enough to be understood? Good. Comprehension passes all. Evil. It's all past comprehension. So, level with understanding on the other side of the tree is wisdom, so we're going to move on to the next, considered as the masculine component of consciousness. All right, so let's pull that up. We're going to go straight on to Hokmah. Notice how, like, none of this is esoteric, right? The tree of, like, Kabbalah, none of, like, Kabbalah, yoga, all this stuff, like, yeah, there's really esoteric aspects of it, absolutely, and we can nerd out about it, but you can tell like, ultimately, As I've said for a long time, magic really is a language for understanding things that are already in front of your face. It's a language for understanding things that you're already experiencing, not something new that you're going to experience. Quality leering. Yeah, thank you. All right. And this is by the way, this is whether it's me, this is me reading someone else. So whether it's this book or other videos by me or videos, anything you listen to from anyone, one of the ways you can tell if a teaching is good is if it's immediately applicable to your life, right? Like it clicks, you get it, it is instinctively felt as good, and you can immediately apply it. As opposed to it's confusing, full of jargon, and leads to scattered thinking. That's a good way to gauge teachings. So level with understanding on the other side of the tree is wisdom, considered as the masculine complement of consciousness. This does not in the least mean that wisdom is exclusively a male prerogative. Polarity on the tree is not sexual in an ordinary sense at all, and the distinctions are simply used as convenient labels to indicate the outgiven or intaken complements of any complete cycle of consciousness. Here we are dealing with the former or outgoing type of comprehension, as distinct from the latter intuitive kind. Contrasted on the two trees, it should read, good, so this is Hokmah, the second sphere, so good, where ignorance is folly, it is bliss being wise. Evil, where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. Good, accept wisdom, why be stupid? Evil, why be wise when stupidity is acceptable? Good, the fear of God begins wisdom. Very true. Evil, who fears the wisdom of any god? Good, wisdom clarifies obscurity. Evil, obscure the clarity of wisdom. Good, why play the fool when it's pleasing to work with wisdom? Evil, why work at wisdom when foolishness gives pleasure? Good, among the wise it is idiotic being stupid. Evil, among idiots the stupid seem wise. Yeah, notice the difference between people who try to surround themselves with people who are smarter than them versus people who surround themselves with yes people, intentionally. Good. Find out how you might encourage wisdom in others. Evil. Don't encourage wisdom in others. They might find you out. I'm going to read that one again. That's a good one. Good. Find out how you might encourage wisdom in others. Evil. Don't encourage wisdom in others. They might find you out. Hilarious. Good. Time is never wasted with wisdom. Evil. Never waste time with wisdom. Good. What can we do without wisdom? Evil. We can do without wisdom. Biotech. Gain of function research. We don't need that. Should we do this? We can do without wisdom. Good. Wisdom cannot afford luxuries. Evil. Better luxuriously stupid than penuriously wise. Better luxuriously stupid than penuriously wise. So better to be rich and dumb than wise and poor. Materialism. Okay. Another super chat. I don't see your username. Let's see. It's Ren again. Hello. Thank you for the other super chat. What are some of the differences between naturally occurring qliphothic experiences versus intentional Qliphoth work? Is it ever truly necessary, or do we just live them through life's natural blowback? So, Cultology says, don't look at the leering center your leering. Very good. So if you're, I'll just put it this way. If you're engaged in the great work, which is, we shall say, integration of the self at all levels of the tree, right? Let's just say this, okay? We'll use totally normie language. It's quite helpful to do that often. If you are using the tree of life as a kind of map or a mandala to better understand yourself and to become a more well-rounded, become a more well-rounded and healthy human being, if you're using it as a psychological model, and a roadmap to a life well lived, then as you work with each sphere, working with the sphere is establishing yourself, your consciousness in that center, learning how to work with it, and part of that is, let's just say, okay, let me put it this way, all right? You're going up the tree. At each one of those spheres, you're going to find a lot of trash and garbage. We could call these shadow aspects or unresolved complexes. So it's like, you know, each time you move into a sphere, you get the key to a new house, a new sphere, it's going to be trashed. Why? Because you haven't examined it yet. And so this is when people say ignorance is bliss, what they really mean is if you don't examine your life, it's not, as Plato said, by the way, tangent. Texas A&M has just, as Temple just informed me, Texas A&M just got rid of the study of Plato. Plato, as it's culturally insensitive or something. Talk about disintegrated thinking. So each time you move into one of those spheres, it's trashed because it hasn't been examined yet. So you might be ignorant of all your, to use modern language, you might be ignorant of all your shit there, but it doesn't mean it's not there. So when you deal with your shit in each of those spheres, that's working with the Qliphoth, right? You're cleaning it out. You're cleaning it out and reintegrating into the healthy version of the sphere. So long way of saying that if you are engaged in Western esoteric work, or any other path, but since we're using this language, you know, if you're engaged in this path, as you progress on the tree, it will bring up the shadow naturally. It will bring out, you will encounter the Qliphoth naturally. You don't need to go seeking it out. And that's the issue with the kind of Kenneth Grant approach. They think they can go seek it out like a Dungeons and Dragons game and figure it all out at once. You'll notice, okay, that's true only on the astral, to be technical. It's like, yeah, you might have mastered the Qliphoth in Yetzirah, right? But that's not the same as dealing with your actual shit in your actual life. That's turning it into internal D&D, which a lot of thelemic practices are too heavy on. Thank you for the super chat. And Frauder says, Shakespeare, gotta love Shakespeare. Shakespeare full of Kabbalah, full of Kabbalah. The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. Yeah. I mean, Socrates said the same thing in so many words. All right, so here we may see stupidity defined as a positive refusal to become wise for a number of what seem inadequate reasons. Yet millions of human beings utterly refuse to enlighten themselves in any spiritual way whatever for many personal motives. Very frequently, the chief cause is sheer inertia, or what used to be called, in good old-fashioned terms, downright laziness. Unwillingness to exert efforts except in pursuit of immediate and obvious profits. Unwillingness to exert efforts except in pursuit of immediate and obvious profits. Pay me. True wisdom has its sphere next to the top of the tree, and relatively few people care to climb so high in search of clearer consciousness. Most would rather stay in what seems like the safety of stupidity with the rest of the crowd. At the altitude of the wisdom sphere, human inhabitants are noticeably scarce compared with lower levels. The sharp, clarified atmosphere so commonly proves too uncomfortable for those who prefer darker and damper conditions elsewhere. Yes, and you see them scurry away like cockroaches. Now we come right to the top of the tree and the vital issue of life itself. How are we to relate ourselves with the conscious cause of living, or the supreme spirit which mankind calls God by so many different titles? So now we're moving on to Kether. Yeah, Ren says, thank you, that makes a lot of sense. I've always been confused why that work was spoken about as its own practice when it seems like it's just doing your own natural dusting. Yeah. There's the magic that you do in the temple where you're tripping out and experiencing all these things. And then there's the magic that you do by living your life. And the temple stuff is only the preview of actually doing that. You know, like for instance, it's one thing to declare yourself a such and such grade because you're on acid and you went through that, you know, in your trip or whatever. It's very different to actually live that out and stabilize it in your own life. And yeah, Frater says, I think anytime at all we access a Sephirah, it is by necessarily transmuting the Qliphoth that surrounds the sphere. Yeah. So I think, and maybe Frater can chime in on this, but in I keep wanting to say Lemurian Kabbalah, but in Lurian Kabbalah, the conception of the tree of life is that the Qliphoth are like jars, pre-existing jars, clay jars, that existed prior to the animating spark of God. So imagine 10 jars, clay pots. The lightning flash of God goes through and breaks all of the pots, leaving the energy balls of the Sephirah. But all the broken shards, so he says, shells, husks, or shards, the shards of the broken pots are still around them. So that's another way of looking at it in a cosmic way. Now we come right to the top of the tree and the vital issue of life itself. How are we to relate ourselves with the conscious cause of living, or the supreme spirit which mankind calls God by so many different titles? Do we adopt some definite attitude of awareness toward this state of being which will affect all our life activities and consequently our ultimately self-becoming? On the other hand, shall we strenuously deny the very existence or likelihood of any such, quote, overbeing, and try to live without reference to it or that at all? Try to live without reference to it or that, whatever we're calling it, at all. Whichever we do, it is certain that we cannot affect such a being by our attitudes, but only our own lives and what we shall become. We alone, stand to gain or lose by the decisions we make at this apical, William Gray's language, apical point of the tree, is the apex, apical point of the tree called the crown, because it is the summit of life from which we either pass into perfect peace beyond or plunge down to the depths again in search of more living experience. A contrast between the two trees here might well appear as, here we go. Good, God is living, not dead. Evil, God is dead, not living. By the way, common misconception, I'd say this on the channel a lot, but I should say it more. When Nietzsche said that God is dead, he wasn't saying that that was a good thing. What he was saying is that Western culture has rejected God, has killed the image of God, and that what will come next is unimaginable horror. And he was right. What came next? Verdun, mustard gas, trenches and barbed wire, Dresden, Auschwitz, and on and on, the nuclear bomb, and on and on and on and on and on. By the way, Thamiel, talk about Thamiel, the contending heads, the split atom. Think about the atom as oneness, crown, the Qliphoth, it's the split atom, the nuclear bomb. That's what we're talking about here. Unity, it's not just math. Unity, atom. Split unity, contending heads, the death of everything on Earth. So Nietzsche wasn't celebrating that. Okay, so good. God is living, not dead. Evil, God is dead, not living. Good. O God, do what thou wilt. Evil, no God, do what you will. Good. God is everywhere. Evil. Wherever is God? Good. God is no thing. Evil. God is nothing. Good. Nothing is impossible with God. Evil. God is nothing but impossible. Good. God knows who exists. Evil. Who knows God exists? Good. Can anyone prove there is no God? Evil. No one can prove there is a God. Subtle but important. Good. Not everyone knows God exists. Evil. Everyone knows God does not exist. Good. God is what anyone can place faith in. Evil. What faith can anyone place in God? Good. Believe in God. Do not doubt divinity. Evil. Don't believe in God. Doubt divinity. Yeah, people are wigging out about the atom. Yeah. This stuff ain't esoteric. You wonder... Imagine being me. This has kept me up at night for like 20 years. This type of thing. Kabbalah is, again, magic. Kabbalah is a language for talking about what's right in front of your face. And if it's true, if a symbol is true, it's applicable on all levels. Holographically, hermetically, as above, so below. If a symbol is true, it is applicable on all levels. And everywhere. At all times. All right. This supreme issue here makes all the difference between whether we steer the whole course of our lives towards spiritual or utterly egotistical ends. The whole issue divides upon whether or not we relate ourselves intentionally with whatever consciousness is the underlying cause of cosmos, however we term or identify this principle. Our affirmations of it will not enlarge, nor our denials of it diminish the existence of this entity by one iota. What our attitudes of awareness will accomplish are changes of our conscious relationship with all that lives, and consequently our own characters and ultimate becomings. That surely matters to everyone. Whether we personalize the power some call God into intimately appreciate conditions of being, or prefer to consider it or that as an indefinitely distant and aloof influence on our affairs, is a matter for individual adjustment. The intelligent mystic normally seeks a way between both near and far extremities, focusing at a median point on the middle pillar, which combines either viewpoint into a satisfactory and workable concept. What matters is the actual concentration of conscious energy, and how we formalize or arrange this is usually dependent on prevailing circumstances of consciousness and availability of inner information. We make images and ideas with whatever we happen to have handy in ourselves at the time, and so these are changeable and improvable constructions. Therefore, we should realize our God images are not fixed, but flexible and adaptable arrangements. Those can be altered to suit needs and contingencies. Our pure abstract imageless concept of ultimate entity, however, is a permanent inner area kept deliberately clear of all else, so that the divinity we dedicate this self-space to may impress into us what it will. Thus, if we balance out the difference between both fixed and mutable angles of inner approach to Supreme Spirit, we shall arrive at a reliable cardinal bearing by which to steer our life course safely into a sound spiritual harbor. Let me drink more of the Buddha's brains. We're all just meat in the end. Now we have covered the tree from one end to the other, with 100 convertible ideas which incline us to evil one way, good to the other, or offer a chance of poise between the two principles, if we're able to learn how to walk this way of the wise. Legend says that we fall into our present low evolutionary position because we demanded a free choice between good or evil. Our violent swings from one side to the other do not seem to have helped us up the tree of life very far as yet. Maybe if we concentrated on keeping a clear way equidistantly from either and progressed at a pace consistent with the constant of cosmos, we should at last learn how to live in the real sense of the word. Let us see what may be done in this vital direction. All right, let's see. So that was chapter 3. Let me see how far into the book we are now. Man, we're still this is only like a fourth way into the book. Let's see how long. Let's see if we can assess at least some of the next... Oh man, the next chapter is long as fuck. What do you guys think? Should we keep going? Let's see what we can do. All right. Chapter 3, right, left, and center. There are only 3 life possibilities to cover the whole range of our cosmic and conscious existence. We may think of these under a wide number of headings such as positive, neutral. Oh, here's again. We may think of these under a wide number of headings such as these. Here you go. Oops. All right. Or any other way we like. Those are the alternatives of action which govern all we do and whatever happens to us in any condition of consciousness. They are the 3 pillars which support the tree of life wherever it grows, which is so, say, in every living soul. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Please super chat. Join to support the channel. This is a good way that you can help. I'm gonna keep going, but if you guys want to start chipping in, that would be most appreciated. So we can not just grow the channel, but so that YouTube can see that people are contributing and hopefully boost the live streams. All right. With such alternatives, we have again 3 alternative courses in their application. 1, we can simply let them all happen to and with ourselves. Okay, so I'm probably, at this point, I'm going to go through this, but I'm probably not going to respond to anything that's not a super chat. Let's just do that, but I will respond if it's a super chat, just so that I don't get tangenting and that people can support the channel. Okay. 2, we can deliberately make them happen of our own accord. 3, we can make a middle mixture of these and live accordingly. Obviously, this last is the most practical means of making sound spiritual progress, so we shall seek out methods of adjusting our lives therewith. The major method it is proposed to put forward here involves the use of what some would call psychodramatic action, and others by the older description of ritual magic. Why so? What is so special about ritualistic procedure that it might prove adequate for such a profound purpose? First and foremost, it involves intentional patterns of consciousness which may be reproduced and enhanced as and when required to meet contingencies. This means a lot of other concomitants. The discipline and training of will, concentration of consciousness into controlled channels of purpose, interaction of inner energies between human and other types of intelligence, and many other important considerations connected with what might be termed the metaphysical mechanics of living. Nobody can work even minor magical rites without automatically employing many of these factors to some degree, even if such a degree may be very small indeed. The efficacy of any ritualism depends upon the direction of its related inner energy, and this depends again on the energy available, skill of operators concerned, pattern of circuitry used, and, of course, capabilities and scope of the inward and invisible agencies of intelligence cooperating. It takes 2 sorts of entity to work what may be called magic with any effect from an earthly basis. Embodied humans intentionally employing specific formulae of consciousness and behavior, partnered by non-physical types of entity capable of linking in and at least generally guiding the appropriate inner energies necessary for accomplishing whatever the overall purpose of the whole operation may be. Our cosmos being constructed as it is, the actualities of this entire process are attenuated through a very deep range of reactions, and humans attempting to work it from merely wish-want motives are likely to be extremely disappointed by the non-results obtained. Unless, of course, they are so determined on gaining their immediate ends that they are prepared to sacrifice very valuable sections of their spiritual structures in exchange. Assuming such insanity is outside our present picture, we can take quite a practical view of the problems posed. On one hand, we see humans determined on following courses of consciousness and intention which lie rather beyond their normal powers of performance. Therefore, they decide to use so-called magical means of summative symbolism in terms of awareness and behavior which expresses their purpose as a formula of faith and work of will. On the other hand, we may see, suppose, or otherwise postulate beings who live beyond embodiment, as we know this term, well able to employ energy entirely without physical mechanisms, yet quite cognitive of patterned consciousness arranged by people living on this or other planets. Oh, we're getting weird now. A working partnership between these distinct life levels is perfectly possible among those capable and willing to form such relationships of spiritual symbiosis. Let us take rather an odd analogy to illustrate the situation. Suppose someone to be standing on the edge of a fish pond observing those very different life forms going about their normal business in an element and circumstances quite incompatible with human living. If the fish are aware of the human at all, it can only be in the vaguest way, which cannot comprehend our natures or modes of living, to more than the very least degree imaginable. The human watches the fish swimming around and gets a general notion of their behavior patterns and adaptations with their circumstances. Now let us suppose a virtually incredible thing happening. One solitary fish starts swimming in repetitive and most peculiar patterns, which turn out to be a message in plain English. H-E-L-P-M-E, help me. Again and again, this is amazing. This is if you understand what he's saying, and you will in a second. This is amazing. Again and again, the creature, he's talking about humans doing ritual. Again and again, the creature spells these unmistakable words in our language. If this happened in actuality, one would hope an interested observer would summon all the aid he could in the way of veterinary and scientific specialists, all motivated by a united aim of helping a fellow creature in totally different dimensions of living, yet capable of communication with us in mutually recognizable evidence of awareness. Amazing. Notice he said repetitively, again and again, ritualistically. To quite an extent, this is more or less what happens in ritual magical procedures. Thank you for the super chat. So by carrying them out on our levels, we make symbolic signs which convey sensible communications to observers and sympathetic types of entity operating along what could be called This is one of the most amazing descriptions of magic I've ever heard. Sympathetic types of entity operating along what could be called contiguous channels of consciousness in different dimensions of living. The patterns of ordinary human living at Earth level are familiar enough to those, quote, inner intelligences. Our behavior to them is much what the behavior of animals and other creatures are to us. Predictable and reasonably certain patterns of conditioned consciousness. Even our most insane and outrageous activities are easily calculated into anticipated cycles. In fact, the behavior of insane humans is much more computable than that of the most balanced beings. As a species of living creature, man is a very guessable proposition to those even a little more advanced in evolution. Now, witness social media algorithms. What happens in the case of those exceptional humans who go beyond standards of average behavior and awareness enough to make recognizable signals in terms of a, quote, inner language immediately intelligible by those whose common consciousness deals with similar symbology? Whatever their reactions may be, it is certain their attention will be attracted and interests aroused. Whether or not this may lead to closer relationships developing is a matter for specific settlement among those concerned. All we may be sure of at our end of Earth living is that certain formulae of consciousness and associated behavior, which some call magical, are bound to make some kind of contact with other types of consciousness than ours on ordinary mortal levels among the rest of mankind. What eventuates from such an inner linkage with different orders of living intelligence than ours depends on many factors outside our immediate control. Whether indeed this may be to our ultimate benefit or otherwise is another issue entirely. Jason might be the devil. What should concern us at present is the possibility of this matter per se. Applying the 3 points of the tree pillars to this problem, we shall find that such extra-mundane agencies, A, exist, B, do not exist, or C, ambivalent. This means to say that the postulate of existence or non-existence, I was actually talking about this earlier. This means to say that the postulate of existence or non-existence apply purely to our conceptions of those limits. What has no existence for us may well be definable by an awareness operating far beyond our greatest range of experience. We are in no position to state dogmatically, nothing exists after such and such a point. We may quite fairly say, I cannot conceive the existence of so-and-so. Yeah, go back and check out my YouTube on From Beyond, where I read From Beyond by Lovecraft. That would be true because it is an admission of human limitations. The central position adopted by anyone of initiated intelligence is to agree that past our furthest point of perception, where non-existence begins for most mortals, the possibility of indefinite extensions into very different dimensions must be at least accepted hypothetical. Once this balance of belief becomes workable, it then proves possible to think, act, or behave relatively to the terms of the hypothesis for the sake of experience within its operative field. Thus, it is quite practical to take a midway stance between the being or unbeing of what were once called simply, quote, spirits, but have since been promoted to becoming, quote, paraphysical entitizations. Paraphysical entitizations. I've never heard that. That's funny. All right, we got another super chat. Pariah Saipomp 6775. Thank you. That's very generous. I've noticed in America, both tribes argue they fight for God, if at all, when in reality it's an image projected on God that suits their biases. At what point does the word God become a poisoned well? Is there a better word? Well, this is human history. This is human history. There's not a better word, but there is learning better discernment. So, for instance, noting what you've just said, I don't know if both sides argue about fight for a God. I don't think the left fights for God at all. And if they do, they just like quote Bible passages to like catch out, you know, a book they never read, to catch out people on the other side, to gotcha them. Very good question. Very good. Thank you for the super chat. Be it noted that we do not have to believe or disbelieve in the actuality of such interagencies per se. What we must believe in is the possibility they exist in their own state of being, yet are capable of interaction with ours by unspecified means or degrees. If you've never read Flatland by Edwin Abbott, or at least read the Wikipedia summarizing it, highly recommended. Great metaphor. In other words, we must be prepared to accept a working hypothesis and go on from there within its term of reference. We might say, in effect, quote, acting on the assumption that the position is such and such, I behave, think, or conduct myself accordingly. That is a perfectly legitimate standpoint for those seeking the middle way of magical practice. The act of faith involved does not rest in whatever inner beings may or may not be concerned, but in one's own ability to make relationships with relative metaphysical equivalents. This makes an important difference in concept. We need not believe in spirit unless we want to, but we positively must believe in our capability of living and behaving as if, this is important, as if the energies available to such entities might be employed on our behalf. In some way, this is rather like the personal credo of an agnostic who says firmly, even if there isn't a God, I shall still live as if there were one, because I honestly believe that is the best thing to do. Here the two extremities of belief and unbelief both support the central course of conduct. This could be paraphrased by a thoughtful exponent of magic to read, quote, even if magic may not work, I shall act as if it did, and then it might. There you have it, by the way. Even if magic may not work, I shall act as if it did, and then it might. Note the self-fulfilling paradox, itself a magical act. Here again, belief is centered in an individual's estimation of its own abilities. It is really extraordinary how relatively little faith is needed to form a basis of magical action, especially when nowadays people are willing to believe so much more unlikely propositions. They will readily pay for lottery tickets in the belief of becoming rich against fantastic odds. They accept the most preposterous come-ons, the wildest and wiliest catches of advertiser and confidence tricksters. Some are even gullible enough to trust politicians' promises. There seems no end to the credulity of mankind in pursuit of phantom profits. Humans will literally believe in almost anything that activates their dual greed-fear life drives. If they ever learned how to equate these out into a centrally poised power or purpose, their faith would change direction quite dramatically. Once shift the force of faith away from material into metaphysical channels, and life itself alters into far greater areas of possibility and promise. The basics of magical beliefs are simply that energy per se extends indefinitely beyond physical limits, that intelligent living consciousness also exists in far finer or spiritual forms than are commonly known to humanity, and furthermore that relationship is possible between humans and such supraphysical extensions of energy and entity. These are the bare essentials. All the rest is a matter of arrangements. The first basic is virtually unavoidable by any rational modern mind. We are constantly faced with energy extending into dimensions of existence utterly beyond the grasp of even our immediate ancestors. Moreover, it is realized that this greatly increased range of action only covers the virtual fringe of incredibly vaster areas which will eventually become accessible to our descendants. Energy as such is endless, infinite, and certainly extends beyond the extremities of our broadest and highest concepts. It needs little faith to accept this today when we live so close to its factuality. The second basic does depend on our definitions of conscious intelligence. If we refuse to postulate this outside of merely human limits, then of course, not only magic, but all other spheres of spiritual activity become automatically closed and non-existent to us. It also requires us to believe implicitly that conscious intelligence is only possible among humans. No other form of living exists beyond biological procedures. And in fact, that nothing can think, move, live, will, or have awareness and intentions in the whole extent of existence except our own species. An acme of egotism apart, the demands on human credulity of an absolutely atheistical creed are virtually past calculation. Positively and insistently to reject the slightest possibility of, quote, other living, than within the small amounts of mortal experience takes an intensity of belief unreachable by the vast majority of mankind. No one strains harder at gnats or swallows larger camels than a dedicated and devoted atheist. Strangely enough, it seldom occurs to him that his strenuous denial of all extra-mundane existence derives principally from his deliberate refusal to accept its possibility. He may prefer to suppose his atheism results from his intellectual experiences and whatever else he accepts as evidence, but if he were honest, he would have to admit limits to his capacity of consciousness. They never do. Within those limits, his denials are legitimate to himself alone. But past that mark, others are entitled to what experiences they will. It is quite reasonable for anyone to say, in effect, within my experience and understanding, no other types of conscious life or entity exist than those inside my range of intellect and comprehension, such is my sincere belief. That is not atheism, but a simple admission of self-limitation. It would also be fair to say, I refuse to concern myself with other than human limits of living. That is an entitlement of free will, which is our natural birthright. Or someone could equally say, I admit such things may be, but I would rather have nothing to do with them. That again is entirely a matter of personal decision or opinion. The crux of the whole issue is one of recognition or admission that what are now called paranormal conditions of consciousness that what are now called paranormal conditions of conscious entity are conceivable as concomitants of our cosmos. This is all once such a standpoint is made. The second basic belief behind magic becomes possible. What follows from thence, if anything, will depend entirely on the people or circumstances concerned. The third basic relationship between intelligent humans and energy entities, usually inaccessible to most mortals, may almost automatically be considered as a possibility once the first two basics prove acceptable. We are not asking here whether or not this should occur, be a good or bad practice, how it might be done, or anything beyond its conceivability. If relationships of any kind at all, however remote, are possible between embodied mortals and non-incarnates of whatever category, then magic becomes at least theoretically workable, and translation of theory into practice is generally only an affair of application through adequate condition of development. Thank you for the super chat. Who did that? I gotta open the chat window. Vanessa, thank you very much. Much appreciated. The very moment that magic amounts to an admissible possibility, almost endless questions arise to be answered. It is worthwhile or not, beneficial or otherwise, difficult or easy, and what is its methodology? Those are some of the most immediate points presented to inquirers. There is also the overriding query of why bother with any form of, quote, inner agency at all? Why can't we do what we want by ourselves? The straight answer to this, of course, is that if we had such capabilities, we should be higher than humans anyway. If, while yet human, we insist on making intentional demands of life none of our facilities are able to supply, then we have no alternative but to direct those demands towards whatever agency seems most likely to deal equitably with them. It does not follow in the least that our initial intentions will eventuate as specified or even seem to have had any effect whatever outside the originator's awareness. So much depends upon the quote inner agencies concerned and a wide variety of factors outside our competence to control. On the other hand, it is amazing what may be accomplished through such agencies, making allowances for natural factors of time-space events comprising our cosmic continuum. Mankind as a whole has always realized those possibilities one way or another. Whether by means of elaborate sacrifices to God concepts, placation of dreaded demons, charms, spells, and conjurations, or straightforward prayers to saints and divinities, humans have placed problems beyond their power of solution in whatever higher hands they believed upon, all down the ages. As often as not, those problems were either answered or ultimately equated. Very seldom by any sort of unusual intervention with natural laws, most eventuating through normal, though often unexpected, channels. In the course of evolution, as man has learned how to solve more and more of his most pressing problems for himself by his own ingenuity, so have the responses of inner agencies appeared to recede into those more abstract realms which we have not yet managed to maneuver for ourselves. Alex, thank you for the super chat. Much appreciated. We seem to have been led along, as it were, by our attempts to contact spheres of consciousness lying somewhat beyond whatever range of awareness we presently possess. No matter how far we progress, it is always that immediately unknown area just ahead of us which calls us with unmistakable clarity along our cosmic course. That is the area in which we are most likely to make our closest contacts with inner intelligences interested in helping us evolve into increasingly higher levels of living. Therefore, we shall focus our attention on that point and see what follows. The first obvious factor is what we might call the validity value of the inner contact we seek. That is, say whether or not our original purpose is likely to meet even the slightest response from any spiritual sort of agency. For instance, we should have no hope at all of any magic immediately materializing some demanded objective. Yet magic may subtly start a chain of events commencing with consciousness and culminating in concrete form through appropriate channels. It is a question of energy conversion. There is a formula for converting energy between physical and spiritual dimensions, but it will not help greedy opportunists very greatly. It is expressed. Now we're getting into equations. Damn. Yeah. All right, we'll see how much further I'm going to go. All right, we got. All right. Here's Bill Gray's equation for energy conversion. Here we see that the factors of quality and amount are divisible by available skill and means, the whole being related by a constant being applied intentionally throughout the equation to produce an eventual effect. In our external cosmos, the constant is light, and in our inner cosmos, it is the mystical equivalent of light or illumination. From this formula, it is obvious that if the C factor is slight, the remainder will be insignificant of issue. Yeah, take that, Peter Carroll. You weren't the first person to do this. Also, no human being alone could produce a sufficient amount of spiritual energy out of its own private capacity to make much of an end effect. Hence the need for contact with inner sources of supply. Then again, the intention factor is an awkward one. For any human to make this great enough for satisfactory results, it would have to be augmented very considerably by other intentions and agreement, or extended perhaps a great deal through time, until an adequate buildup occurred. Thank you, Frater. Magic is not just a matter of wand-waving, but of coordinating all necessary points of a power plan related with purpose. Yes, elaborately but well put. Let me say that again. Magic is not just a matter of wand-waving, but of coordinating all necessary points of a power plan related with purpose. In general, therefore, we may expect that the spiritual factors employed in magic will operate through purely inner fields of force, only affecting our material condition where direct linkage is available. Assuming a validity of intention and correct constant of consciousness, there is every reason to suppose the other factors are likely to be augmented from inner supplies by responsible agencies. What, then, seems to be the most valid intention a human being might have in this world? The conversion of evil into good? Strange to say, not entirely, because good can be perverted back into evil again by contrary intentions. To convert evil into good and then equate both principles into a poised perfection, however, is the highest, holiest, and surely the most valid intention possible to humans hoping for ultimate emancipation into infinite enlightenment. It is the transmutation of hermeticists, which signifies establishment of the golden mean pillar between the extremities of the black and white ones. This takes us back to the legend of our fall, or accepting responsibility of choice between good or evil. It is the very convertibility of these principles in our world which indicates how far we have fallen from original potential perfection. The very best of all we consider good, and the worst of what we accept as evil is impermanent and alternative. Each principle automatically implies the other. As affairs stand with humanity in mundane conditions, we cannot work good unless evil existed, nor could we work evil unless its opposite principle made it so. Each creates the other's possibilities. That is the position we have arrived at since partaking of the fatal fruit obtained from the tree of knowledge. In other words, the development of our intellect and experience has very greatly increased our scope for both good and evil. Only the tree of life can produce the inner qualities we need for equating everything into a stable spiritual cosmic condition by the middle pillar, connecting us directly with that super-supernal state, termed perfect peace profound. This amounts to the redemption of mankind into the immortal status of identity, intended originally by our eternal initiator. Thank you, Jacobus. Therefore, in designing any kind of magical rite or practice to incorporate and relate all these factors, we must bear in mind the fundamental pattern of the whole spiritual structure. This is simple enough in essence. We need to take our starting situation and project it through its evil or worst possibilities into infinite negation, pull back the good and best possibilities from the other side until it levels with us, then raise up the pillar of perfect poise between the two extremes, which connects us directly with whatever we accept as divinity. By this act, we identify our own wills with that of the eternal entity operating through us. If we can make a satisfactory symbolic and dramatized version of all this, it should prove of the greatest spiritual help. By acting out our problems with coordinated hearts, minds, souls, and spirits, their solutions are bound to eventuate through the inner energies, which will become set in motion thereby. Ritual psychodramas are usually enacted in a temple or special area set up for this sole purpose. Their vital inner patterns, however, should apply to life itself on all intended levels. That is to say, what we do or say symbolically in our temples must be capable of translation into other terms of living, both in physical and more subtle spheres. Otherwise, a rite would be no more than private theatricals. It is the extensibility of a rite into life which is of paramount importance. That is the keynote of sound ritualism. Once any rite is successfully temple set, its performance in terms of inner or outer living should become perfectly practical and normal. The function of a temple is similar to a research laboratory, which develops prototype specimens of important items intended for much wider fields of application. Temples ought to be for producing life patterns. This is well put. Temples ought to be for producing life patterns which will eventuate according to intention. The advantage of temple work is that it affords favorable conditions for humans to cooperate with other types of entities, whose capabilities of consciousness are very different from ours. Our natural interest should be to establish linkage with those inner or spiritual beings who are most closely concerned with our highest and best possibilities of life in its supreme sense. This is accomplished by mutual intentions and patterns of partnership. Quite possible outside a physical temple, of course, but such a starting point is undeniably useful and convenient as a basis for building the true temple, not made with hands, which has to be constructed inside ourselves, where the actual inner contacts are made. Temple ritualism works by means of physical, verbal, and other coordinated symbology, which forms a framework for the equivalent energies employed. It is best to keep these carefully confined to essentials only. Whatever is not part of the pattern should not intrude into the rite. Apart from temple working space, the physical elements of this particular rite are very simple. 2 practical pillars, black and white, a central staff, gold or otherwise, plus a symbolic overhead contact between the pillars with a central 0 significance, and a floor-level symbolic linkage with a central base for erecting the staff. All this can be easily contrived from hardboard and wooden uprights colored with ordinary enamel paint. For those without their own ideas, the 2 pillars may be about 7 feet high, minimum of an inch thick, standing on made-up bases or in earth pots, connected at bottom by a flat foot-wide strip of gray material and, across the top, by an arch strip to represent the rainbow, violet at the white pillar and red at the black. Okay, now it's just temple instructions. The yellow central point of this hopeful spectrum may be 0-shaped, or better still, have a hole in which a point of actual light appears. Okay, I'm gonna stop for now, I think. So we got up to page, I'm gonna make a note. We got up to page 39. He's getting up to temple construction. And we will return soon. So let me know what you thought in the comment. Thank you, Josh, by the way. Thank you everyone for the super chats. This is about as far as I can go without taking a break. So I'm going to go walk my dogs. And I hope that everyone had a great time. And we will see you at the next Sunday service. Of course, like and subscribe. Become a member. And make sure you're on the mailing list. It's start.magic.me. Start.magick.me. Fortuna Working 2 is coming out within the next 48 hours. And thank you, Frauder. The saddest aspect of life right now is that science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom. That's the name of the game right there. Yogananda said more or less the same. All right. Lots of love, and send some